Well, hello again. I am Pastor Will Cole, pastor at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Millerstown, Pennsylvania, or affiliated with the Association of Free Lutheran Congregations, and I welcome you to Answers with Pastor Will. All right, today's question is natural selection the same thing as evolution? See, and I think this can trip many people up, and I want to try to be as simple as possible here because we've already talked about in previous videos on how, the Bible and evolution mix together like oil and water. One doesn't fit into the other. So let's take a moment and let's define each of these. All right, so what is natural selection? And this is an evolutionist definition, and then I'll give you what I believe. But evolutionary change based on differential reproductive success on individuals within a species. That was Michael Park's definition. Or here's another one. The process by which genetic traits are passed on to each successive generation. Over time, natural selection helps species to become better adapted to their environment, also known as survival of the fittest. Natural selection is the driving force behind the process of evolution. Now, I would agree with this all up until the last part, but this is getting closer to what it is. And that was actually taken from the National Geographic. All right, and so here is, let's see here. And so let's go to, what they would call evolution. All right, C.J. Gold defined it as unfolding in time of a predictable or prepackaged sequence in an inherently progressive or at least directional matter. Or D. O'Leary, he wrote, the theory that all life forms are descended from one or several common ancestors that were present on early Earth 3 to 4 billion years ago. Now, the big idea referring to evolution is that living things or species are related to one another through common ancestry from earlier forms that differed from them. Now, Darwin called this descent with modification, and it is still the best definition of evolution we can use, especially with members of the general public and with young learners. That was Eugene Scott. All right. So let's try to keep things simple here. Now, I'm sure everyone has heard the terms. I don't like to use them because I think it can give the wrong idea. Microevolution and macroevolution. Now, microevolution would be, the natural selection. All right, which I would rather just call that natural selection or adaptation and variation. See, this is the kind of thing that Darwin noted on the Galapagos Islands with the various different types and appearances of finches. All right, and then macroevolution, which I normally just refer to as evolution, generally starts, the belief starts where life came from non-life in a primordial soup, right? Like I said here, 2 to 3 billion years ago, where the first living cell came to life, and then over time they took on new characteristics, and one form evolved into another, yet more complex form. So basically, to really sum this up as simply as possible, you start out with a one-celled organism and you end up with a human being over billions of years. All right, so those are the basic definitions. Now, and because of that, natural selection is not the same as evolution. All right, natural selection, you're within the same type, or the Bible would refer to it as the same kind. So, in other words, you start with a dog and you end up with another type of dog. But either way, they're still dogs. And this does get into the survival of the fittest, which biblical creationists would agree with. Yes, the strongest survive in the animal kingdom because we live in a sinful, broken world that is marred by sin. Everything is affected. And so, yes, only the strongest survive. And you see where you have more than one different type of bird, for example, or like say, let's go back to the finches. Some had fat beaks, some had long, skinny beaks. Various types. Well, which ones will generally survive? Well, and whichever ones can, get food better, for example, right? If you're in a place where you need that strong, skinny beak, and you have a big fat one, well, you're probably going to be going on a diet. You're not going to be able to get the food you need, and you're going to die out. And so over time, certain traits become dominant in certain areas. And we've talked about this before too, where we talked about, the different kinds. Also applies to people and how you have certain traits, certain dominant traits of people in certain areas around the world. So that is all natural selection. It shows the variety that God placed in DNA. All right. Now we go over to the evolution side there, where we've talked about this before, how there really is no evidence towards it. Nowhere in the fossil record do you find an intermediate species. Now some will try to say Archaeopteryx, and we can talk about this in a later video. So, well, that's half bird, half dinosaur. It's like, no, it wasn't. It was a bird. It's a dead bird, but it is a bird nonetheless. And so basically the difference between natural selection and evolution is that natural selection, you have dogs. You have all of the same kind. In evolution, you have one kind evolving, getting more complex and adding on more characteristics over millions or billions of years and turning into something completely different. So say like a one-celled organism to a few-celled organism, to say like jellyfish, right? Which could have led to like fish, and other sea creatures, and amphibians and lizards, and mammals and apes, monkeys, and humans, and that kind of thing. And so they have this evolutionary tree of life, which, by the way, folks, is not provable, never existed. It's a way they try to explain things, but they never found intermediate forms. And of course, this would make sense. What good is half a wing? Or, half a leg? It doesn't make sense that intermediate forms would not be able to survive. So, what can we take from this? Natural selection. It's real. It's provable. It's observable. You've had breeders doing it for centuries, right? That would be natural selection. And of course, the survival of the fittest We see that through nature. Only the strongest survive, the weak tend to die. But that's the result of living in a sinful, broken world. Evolution, not real. You know, in the biblical creation model, one animal does not evolve into another. God created each kind already fully formed. You know, the original dog probably looks something like a wolf, for example. You know, the kinds that you would find on the ark. You know, that kind of thing. But that's natural selection and not evolution. All right? And so I know that there's going to be plenty of folks that disagree with this, especially on the evolutionist side. But I'm here to provide the other side, to show that there is truth in the Word of God, that the Word of God is completely true and inerrant, and we can trust it. And although it may not necessarily be a history book, there is history within it. And whenever there is history in it, we can take it to the bank. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are in the Millerstown area, we're half an hour west of Harrisburg. The address is 600 Centerville Road, Millerstown, Pennsylvania, 17062. We have our Sunday school and adult Bible class at 9 a.m. and worship at 10. All right, check us out on our website, stmatthewpa.org, and these will also be on there as well. And below that, if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, please hit the contact button there, write your question out, and it will shoot me an email with that question, and we'll include that in a future episode. All right, so hey, God's blessings to everyone, and we'll see you next time.